Here's a question for you. What is the function of a constitution? Here are your best answers. In the USA, anyway, it's a set of overarching principles and rules that determine what type of laws each state can make regarding various aspects of society and governance, such that no laws in a particular state can be made that go against, negate, or nullify a constitutional principle that applies to the entire country. Well, okay, that was just one answer, but it's a pretty good one. And so, with that in mind, with the idea of the Constitution, it's just a bunch of rules, we have to ask ourselves, why is it so important? Or, what about these rules? Why does it exist? Has it always existed? Well, not quite. If you go back far enough after the Revolutionary War, before the Constitution, the United States was ruled by a set of documents known as the Articles of Confederation. And they were, to put it simply, inefficient. And so, as tensions started to rise and problems started to pile up, and the government found itself crawling along without a success in sight, it's a bit hyperbolic, but you get the idea, they decided to try something else. And by they, James Madison's really the guy. The concerted movement to overhaul the Articles of Confederation began in 1786 when Madison and his friends persuaded the Virginia Assembly to recommend a convention to explore the creation of a unified system of, quote, commercial regulations. So there you have it. James Madison and his friends are not satisfied with what's going on, so they want to change it. And while we could spend the whole video on the Articles of Confederation, that's not what we're focusing on here today. And so what's the deal? What's got James Madison and all his friends so worked up? Well, a lot of things. Events played into Madison's hands. Soon after the Annapolis meeting, an uprising known as Shays' Rebellion, involving several thousand impoverished farmers, shattered the peace of western Massachusetts. Now, there's a lot of things that go into Shays' Rebellion, but the point is that people are nervous, and when things go bad, visibly for everyone, it's much easier to convince them that, something should be done. So they hold a meeting in Philadelphia. They want to get things done. And the supermajority wasn't going to cut it, and they knew it, so they changed the rules. Something that we find that they're pretty good at doing from time to time when it suits them, or when they're stuck. In a second procedure move, the delegates decided to vote by state, but in order to avoid the kinds of problems that had plagued the Confederation, they ruled that key proposals needed the support of only a majority instead of the 9 states required under the Articles. Now, there's a particular problem that pops up often in the very beginning, which is big states versus small states. And because each one does not feel like they have enough influence and power, and so they all want it. And so the big states are like, well, we're big, we deserve to be treated like we're big. And the small states are like, well, we're small, but we like to be treated like everybody else, please, because equality is important, or something like that. But, it's all about state identity, not the individual, so it gets a little bit confusing. But the point is that there's competition between the little small states like Rhode Island, with a big attitude, and the really big states like New York, or, for instance, that has an even bigger attitude. And they need to figure out, how do we solve this problem? The Virginia plan envisioned a national legislature consisting of 2 houses, one elected directly by the people, the other chosen by the first house from nominations made by the state assemblies. And if you're asking yourself, well, wait a minute, that's not quite what we have now, that's true. The plan doesn't get chosen. In fact, it is countered by another plan known as the New Jersey Plan. On June 15th, these are critics of the Virginia Plan, spoke up. William Peterson, a New Jersey lawyer, advanced the so-called New Jersey Plan, a scheme that retained the unicameral legislature in which each state possessed one vote, and that at the same time give Congress extensive new powers to tax and regulate trade. So basically, the New Jersey plan says, well, Articles of Confederation aren't so bad. We just can't tax people. So let's just fix that. Let's have unicameral, one camel, one hump, one house. In regards to the New Jersey plan, we find that the delegates listened politely and then soundly rejected the New Jersey plan on June 19th. Indeed, only New Jersey, New York, and Delaware voted in favor of Patterson's scheme. But that didn't do it for the small states. They wanted to feel like they had an equal place at the table. And so, what we ended up having is the system we have today, which involves the House, which is based off of population representation, and the Senate, which every state gets 2. And you can't pass a law without getting it through both houses, and so small states have much more say in the Senate than they would in the House of Representatives. There's the balance of power that everybody wants, and so the first compromise of the Constitution is struck. However, the second compromise is less palatable, quite frankly, and it is known as the 3/5 compromise, and it has to do with slaves. Now, the short version is that because there were so many slaves, Northerners were worried that Southern states would have uneven representation in the House of Congress because they have millions and millions of slaves. They say, hey, we're going to do this based off Pennsylvania population, good old Benji boy, this Benjamin Franklin, then better include those slaves. Which, it's interesting because they want to argue that slaves are property, but then they also want that property counted. So are they property or are they people? Because you can't count your horses or your dogs or your cattle, but they do want you to be able to count slaves. And the second debate here is sparked. And so what do? The committee agreed that for the purpose of determining representation in the lower house, slaves would be counted, but not as much as free persons. For every 5 slaves, a congressional district received credit for 3 free voters. A deal that gave the South much greater power in the new government than it would have otherwise received. As with most compromise solutions, the one negotiated by Franklin's committee fully satisfied no one. It did, however, overcome a major impasse, and after the small states gained an assured voice in the upper house, the Senate, they cooperated enthusiastically in creating a strong central government. And so the first 2 compromises of America's constitutional history are 1, to give slave owners more power, because of 2, they really just wanted to form a government.